Myers' place, Chapter 7. Mary shifted around on the couch in her dad's home office, trying to get her body into a comfortable position. Her room was too trashed to sleep in tonight. Besides, she really didn't want to go back in there right now after what had happened. Her father's desktop looked like some sort of bizarre shrine, with 10 or so flickering candles placed around the blank computer. The city couldn't restore the shredded power lines until tomorrow. Mary's mother entered the room carrying a steaming mug of hot chocolate with a giant mound of whipped cream on top. "Here you go, honey," she said, handing it to her daughter. "Are you sure you want to go to school tomorrow? It might be a good idea for you to stay home and rest," she suggested. Mary sat and took a sip from the mug. "No, Mom," she said quickly. "I need to be around people." Mrs. White smiled, but the concerned look remained in her eyes. "Okay," she said with a sigh. "I'll have the cleaning crew come tomorrow morning and straighten up your room." She laughed. "I bet you never thought you'd hear me say that, huh?" Mary managed to laugh at her mom's attempt at humor, but the sound came out more like a dry cough. Her neck and throat were still sore. Yeah, Mary's thoughts drifted back to the horrible attack. She really needed to talk right now. She scooted over beneath the patchwork quilt to make room for her mom to sit down. Mary stared blankly at her father's computer, which gleamed eerily on the desk. "I can't understand it. I just don't see how Jeff could have done this to me." Her voice trailed off. Mrs. White squeezed Mary's hand. "I don't understand it either. He seemed like such a nice young man when you were seeing him last summer. But you never really can tell what a person is like inside. Look at Jeffrey Dahmer. Everyone thought he was such a nice boy next door, until they found human heads in his refrigerator. Did Jeff ever act strange like this before?" Mary shook her head. "No, never," she said, then suddenly remembered his bizarre behavior at school. "Well, not until yesterday. He'd heard that I was going out with Josh Pender, and he came up to me at school and tried to warn me." Mrs. White's eyebrows arched up. "Warn you?" she asked. Mary cringed. "Like, he said that Josh was dangerous." The last word stuck in her mind. Dangerous. Mrs. White could see that Mary was starting to get upset again. She forced herself to smile and asked, "So, how was your date with Josh? Did you have a good time?" A loud yawn escaped Mary's mouth. "Yeah," she said sleepily. "We had a really good date. We went on his boat." "His boat? Wow," Mrs. White said, obviously impressed. "Did he do anything strange?" "No, Mom," she answered. "He was pretty much a perfect gentleman. It looks like the only dangerous person in this town is Jeff Wayland. He must have gotten jealous and snapped," she said with a hint of sadness in her voice. "Well, don't worry about it, honey," Mrs. White reassured her. "Jeff is in police custody now. You're safe." "Yeah, I know," Mary said, yet something was still bothering her. She spoke her thoughts aloud. "Like, I keep thinking about what he said, about someone else being in the house, and—" Mrs. White cut her off. "Of course he would say something like that. For Pete's sake. The kid was found knocked out cold on your bedroom floor with a concussion, surrounded by the entire police department." Mary closed her heavy eyelids. "I know, but I remember hitting the intruder on the head. That's the weird part." Mrs. White rose and tucked the quilt around Mary's shoulders. She explained, "Sometimes in a traumatic situation you do things that you don't remember, honey." She planted a kiss on her daughter's cheek. "Get some rest, sweetie." "Okay, Mom," Mary said. "Thanks for listening." Mrs. White smiled and blew out the candles. Mary lay on her side and stared into the darkness. But even though her body was exhausted, her mind refused to let her rest. What if someone else had been in the house? What if Jeff had been telling the truth? She wondered. But who else could it have been? Mary was startled by a sudden noise. The old house let out a groan as it creaked uneasily on its foundation. A horrible thought invaded Mary's mind. Could it have been Michael Myers? Mary squeezed her eyes shut, trying to turn off the fear that was sweeping through her. Mary yawned again and tried to think of happier times, but her mind betrayed her. As she approached the edge of sleep, her thoughts flashed back to late August, last summer. She'd just picked up Jeff at his house, a run-down two-bedroom dwelling on the edge of the cemetery. Mary had a picnic lunch packed up in the back seat of her convertible, which they planned to eat at the lake. They drove toward town with the top down, allowing the hot wind to blow wildly through their hair. It was just a couple of weeks before school started, and Mary hadn't made any friends besides Jeff. The two of them had practically spent all of their free time together when Jeff wasn't working with his dad. Jeff was a really great guy. They had so much fun together. He never had any money to take her anywhere, but she didn't care. Jeff took her on long hikes through the woods and for swims in the lake. They'd only been seeing each other for 3 weeks, but Mary was starting to develop some strong feelings for him. He always looked so good in his old t-shirt and shorts, so natural, and he was a great kisser. On Main Street, Mary had pulled into a parking space in front of the liquor store to buy a couple of cold sodas. "Be right back," she called to Jeff, who smiled from the passenger seat of her car. Mary went straight for the cooler and grabbed a six-pack. When she turned around to take the purchase to the counter, she suddenly collided into a severely handsome teenage boy. Her sodas scattered from the plastic binder all over the floor. "Oh, I am so sorry," Mary apologized to him. He smiled coolly, checking her out from head to toe. "No problem, cutie." Mary blushed and stepped around him. He extended his hand toward her. "I'm Josh Pender. Are you new around here?" Mary shook his hands. "Yeah, I'm Mary White. Nice to meet you." She bent over to gather the drinks. Josh handed her the last can. "Will you be going to Haddonfield High?" he asked. "Yeah," she smiled. "Like, maybe I'll see you around." Jeff Whalen entered the store and stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Josh talking to Mary. He overheard Josh ask her for her phone number and saw Mary giggle. Josh sure is cute, Mary thought, but I'm seeing Jeff and it wouldn't be right to give him my phone number. She politely excused herself. "I've got to go," she told him, but she didn't. Jeff had gone back to the car and leaned against the door. He scowled jealously as he watched them talking through the store window. He hated Josh Pender, and his money, and the kind of person he was. Mary had exited the store with a silly grin on her face. "Like, I just met the nicest guy in there," she commented. "How come you're standing outside the car?" she asked. Jeff just glared at her. "Why do you think?" he asked. Mary threw the bag in the back of the car. "I don't know," she said sarcastically. "Are you, like, ready to go?" Jeff was silent. Mary looked across the street at a thrift shop she hadn't noticed before. "Oh, look!" she exclaimed. "Let's go in. I just love digging through all the old junk in those places." Jeff's expression was still serious. "No," he insisted. "Let's just go." "Lighten up," she teased. "I want to go inside. Come on, let's blow a little cash." "Is this some kind of joke, Mary?" he asked. "Look, I don't need your charity," he said, his voice mocking. Mary had totally lost this conversation somewhere. "Charity? What are you talking about?" she asked. Jeff clenched the edge of his t-shirt and angrily shook it at her. "You think I have to buy my clothes here? Well, I don't," he declared. He looked away from her and said with a sneer, "It's just like a rich, spoiled chick to assume that I'd have to do my school shopping here." "School shopping?" she said, trying to analyze this bizarre blow-up. Mary suddenly realized that Jeff probably did shop here, not because he was into thrift shopping, but because he was so poor. His pride had been damaged, big time. "Oh, Jeff," she said compassionately, "I wasn't thinking anything. My buds and I back in L.A. always hit the thrifts," she explained. "I just thought it would be fun to—" Jeff banged his fist against the door of her car. "Look, it's been nice, but I don't think we should hang out anymore," he said. He looked at her with disgust. "You're too rich for my blood. You'll see what I mean when school starts. It's all about rich and poor. It'll never work out between us." "Too rich?" Mary snorted. "What are you talking about? I'm not rich. I'm middle class, you dork." Jeff laughed sarcastically. "Middle class," he spat back, grabbing her arm. "It figured you'd say something like that. Maybe Josh Pender would be a better match for you. I saw the way you were flirting with Mr. Moneybags." Mary was infuriated by his stupid adolescent behavior and tore herself away from his strong grip. She hadn't been flirting with anyone. "If you wanted to dump me, at least you could have concocted a better reason," she thought angrily. "Like, you're a real jerk, you know that?" She hurled a sandwich from the picnic basket at him and screamed, "Here's a sandwich for you, poor boy!" She burst into tears and tore off down the street in her car. That was the last time she'd spoken to Jeff Wayland, except for the other day at school. Sure, Jeff was a little weird, but weird enough to try and kill her? His warning repeated over and over in her mind. Stay away from Josh. He's dangerous. Could Josh have parked his car somewhere after their date and come inside the house? She wondered. No way, she decided. He might be a hormone-crazed teenager, but he wasn't the attacker type. On the other hand, neither was Jeff. Mary didn't know what to think. Chapter 8. The next day at school was a rough one. Mary had spent most of the morning dodging her friends and questions about her date with Josh. Luckily, no one had heard about the attack, and since Mary wore a turtleneck sweater, the bruises and scratches on her neck were not visible. Mary figured that being at school was a lot safer than being cooped up in that house all by herself. Thank God she hadn't seen Jeff Wayland anywhere today. She could only hope that the police were still holding him, or that he'd been released and was too ashamed to show his face at school. After school, Josh spotted Mary hurrying off toward the student parking lot. He chased after her and finally caught her up. "Where have you been all day?" he asked. "I've been looking for you everywhere." "Hi, Josh." Mary casually waved. She really didn't feel like talking to him right now, or to anyone else for that matter. She just wanted to get away. Maybe I'll drive downtown and go shopping for my Halloween costume, she thought. Josh tagged along behind her. "Is everything okay, Mary? Are you mad at me or something? I thought we had a serious chemistry thing going on last night. Am I right?" Mary couldn't help but smile at him. He was acting like a little puppy dog. "Of course I'm not mad at you. I just had a bad night, that's all." Josh looked really disappointed. "You did?" he asked glumly. Mary corrected herself. "Oh, no, not with you. Something bad happened later last night." She caught herself before she said anything more. She wasn't sure if she knew Josh well enough to pour her heart out. "What?" he asked. What happened?" Mary stiffened a little. "Nothing. I'm okay." "What do you mean you're okay?" he asked. "You're talking as if you had an accident or something. Now you've got me curious." Mary searched his concerned face. I just... Never mind." Josh put his hands on Mary's shoulders and looked her straight in the eye. "Open up a little, Mary. It might help to talk about it." Here goes nothing, Mary thought. She lowered her eyes. I was attacked last night." "What?" Josh yelled. "Last night? When? Who did it?" Mary calmly explained. "After you left, someone broke into the house and attacked me." She paused for a moment and sucked in her breath. The police found Jeff Wayland on my floor." "Jeff Wayland?" Josh exclaimed. He caught himself before he said too much. "Jeff Wayland. Jeff Wayland?" he mumbled, as if trying to remember who he was. "Oh, yeah, that creepy loser guy who lives down by the cemetery," he asked. "Do you know him?" Mary asked. "No," Josh snapped quickly. "He attacked you? That scum-sucking creep. Are you okay?" Mary nodded her head and looked blankly at the ground beneath her feet. The concern in Jeff's eyes turned to fierce anger, and he pounded his fist in the palm of his hand. "I'm going to kick his sorry ass all the way back to the graveyard," he growled viciously. No, Mary said, waving the idea off. "I think the police still have him, and we're not sure that he was the one who did it." Josh's face became puzzled. "But you just said," Mary explained. "Jeff says he didn't do it. He said someone else, was in the house, and he came in to save me." As the words came out of her mouth, Mary suddenly realized how stupid she sounded. "Why am I trying to protect Jeff?" she wondered. Josh rolled his eyes. "What was he doing at your house in the first place, then?" he asked. Mary didn't have an answer. "I don't know, but the police will handle him," she said, her voice doubtful. "Are you sure?" he asked. Are you sure you're okay?" Mary smiled. Josh really seemed to care. "Yeah, I'm pretty freaked out, but I'm okay." Josh hooked his arm around her shoulder. "Let's go out tonight and forget about that loser," he suggested. "Let's get the whole gang together and go party somewhere." He gave her a wink. "Sounds like you could use a little group therapy." "I don't know," Mary said. "I don't think it would be a good idea." "Come on, it's Friday night," he reminded her. "Besides, I want to spend more time with you." The dreamy look in Josh's soft blue eyes was almost irresistible. "I'll think about it," she said. He gave her a little peck on the cheek. "I'll call you later, and we'll figure out where we're going to go." He smiled. Mary smiled back and opened the door of her car. "Okay," she laughed, amused by the way he wouldn't take no for an answer. Mary carefully maneuvered her car out of the student parking lot to avoid hitting herds of kids and sophomore drivers who had just gotten their licenses. She drove her red convertible down Main Street and pulled into a parking space a few doors away from Johnson's department store. She sighed, looking through her windshield at the old-fashioned general store. Johnson's was the closest thing to a shopping mall in Haddonfield. It sold everything from stationery to cough medicine to cheap sneakers. The Halloween costume display in the window caught her eye. She figured that she might get a few ideas for what to dress up as tomorrow night if she went in and browsed around. After all, she had some time to kill, and she certainly didn't want to go home to that empty house. She couldn't wait for the mega shopping mall to open next month. Mary pushed open the door of the store, and a little bell tinkled against the glass. She sifted through the rack of costumes and mumbled, "French maids, witches, vampires, a gypsy." A gypsy? "Yeah, that's perfect," she thought, "since I've just migrated across the country." She crinkled her nose at the cheap nylon costume and decided she'd be better off putting together her own gypsy get-up at home. She had a red broom skirt and tons of costume jewelry that she could use. All she needed was a pair of gaudy gold earrings. Mary selected a pair of dangling coin earrings from the jewelry rack and a pair of glittery pantyhose. Happy with her find, she went over to the cosmetics counter and picked out a bottle of gleaming gold nail polish. She also bought some violet eyeshadow and a stick of black eyeliner to create the mysterious, smoky-eyed look of a gypsy girl. She was feeling better as she carried her plastic bag out of the store. At least she decided what to be for the party tomorrow night. Mary stood on the sidewalk, digging through her purse for her car keys. She heard someone whisper her name. She turned around and gasped as panic welled up inside of her. Jeff Whalen stepped out of the alley alongside the store. In shock, Mary dropped her bag, and her purchases scattered all over the sidewalk. Jeff took a step backward, realizing he'd scared her. I'm sorry, Mary," he stammered. He bent down to try and help her recover her things. Mary's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't seem to grasp the bottle of nail polish that had rolled into the gutter. "Leave me alone," she shouted. "Go away, or I'll call the police," she warned. Jeff stood up and raised his hands. He stood there defenseless, his palms spread. He really hoped she didn't start screaming. He had to talk to her. Okay, I'm not going to hurt you. I know this looks batshit crazy, but I've got to tell you what happened last night." Mary's eyes darted from left to right and back again. There were plenty of people around. He wouldn't dare try to strangle her right here on the street, she told herself. But she still had to get away from him fast. She grabbed the eyeshadow, which had landed next to his heavy work boot. Just go away and stop following me." Jeff lowered his voice. "The police let me go late last night. There was no evidence. In fact, whoever broke in didn't leave any fingerprints." This kept her quiet long enough for him to continue. "I saw someone come out of the woods and go around the back of your house. When I saw all the lights go off, I freaked out." Wait, What were you doing at my house anyway? She demanded. Jeff's face became red with embarrassment. I was worried that Josh might try to get you to do something you didn't want to do. I was just trying to protect you. Mary was furious. Since when do I need you as my bodyguard? She spat. Since you started going out with Josh, he blurted out. Jeff pleaded. I was just trying to help. You don't know about Josh. Not like I do. Mary snapped. Well, as far as I know, Josh barely even knows who you are, except, that you're a loser who lives by the cemetery. Jeff controlled his anger. Yeah, maybe so, he growled. Next time you see your buddy Josh, why don't you ask him how he knows that I live in the house next to the cemetery? Ask him what happened there last New Year's Eve. Ask him about the girl. Mary flinched. What are you trying to tell me? She said coldly. She couldn't believe she was actually standing here, having a conversation with Jeff Wayland. Anger flashed in Jeff's eyes. Nothing. Just ask him. You'll see. Mary cringed back, trying to inch toward her car. Jeff seemed so forceful, so dangerously hostile. Something weird was going on here, and she didn't know what it was. Jeff took a deep breath. Mary, let's forget about Josh for a minute. I have something far more important to tell you. Well, I don't want to hear it. She turned away to open her car door. Jeff continued talking to the back of her head. Late last night, after my dad picked me up from the police station, I saw something weird out in the cemetery. Mary stood frozen, wondering where this story was leading. Jeff lowered his voice to a whisper. There was a light out there, so I followed it, and I found... He stopped as if he could barely bring himself to say it. I found a lit-up jack-o'-lantern on Judith Meyer's grave. He placed his hand on Mary's shoulders, which made her tremble. His voice quivered. I think Michael Myers is back. I think he was in your house last night. Mary was paralyzed. Was he lying? Was he making this crazy story up to cover himself? To make her believe that he was on her side and that she was in grave danger? She shook his hands off her shoulder and whipped around to face him. You're crazy, Jeff Wayland. You're a freaking headcase. Stay away from me, she screamed. Mary jumped in her car and sped off down the road. Chapter 9. A couple of hours after the Jeff Wayland incident, Mary finally pulled into her driveway. She'd driven up to the lake and parked for a while, hoping that the fresh air would help her clear her head. Her mind was so full of confused, tumbling thoughts. But it hadn't helped. Just thinking about it all had only made the confusion worse. The one thing she was sure of, though, was that Jeff Wayland had really snapped, and she was very afraid that he'd come back to the house again. The house looked peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened there. She unlocked the door and very carefully looked around to make sure no one was inside. Then she checked the new deadbolt on the back door just to make herself feel better. Mary's stomach growled. It was almost dark, and a storm was brewing, and she realized that she hadn't eaten lunch today. She grabbed a bagel from the bread box and reached for a knife from the wooden block on the counter. Mary realized that something was wrong and dropped the bagel. The bread rolled across the floor. All of the butcher knives were missing. She stepped backward away from the counter, staring at the empty block. Had the intruder taken the knives? Had he meant to... Suddenly the phone rang on the kitchen wall, loudly making her jump. Get a grip, she told herself. Hello? She said warily. Her parents' car pulled up in front of the house. Mary picked the bagel off the floor. Oh, hi, Josh, she said into the receiver. No, I'm fine. Mary's mom walked through the kitchen and waved hello. Hang on a minute, Mary said to Josh. Mary turned to her mom. Mom, the knives are missing, she told her. Well, I certainly hope so. I took them in to get sharpened this morning, Mrs. White said. With a sigh of relief, Mary picked up the receiver again. Hi, Josh. My parents just came home from work. They're building the mega mall on the outside of town. She smiled as Josh, in his velvety smooth voice, asked her to go out with him tonight. He'd already called Shannon, Kimmy, and Tanya, and they were all coming. She certainly didn't want to stick around her house and wait for Jeff Wayland to pay her another visit. Okay, she agreed. I'll meet you guys at Rose's Diner in 30 minutes. Bye! Mary hung up the phone and went up to her room to change. The cleaning service had done a great job, she thought. Everything had been put back in its place. She dumped the plastic bag of costume accessories from Johnson's on her dresser and slipped into a pair of black sweats and a matching hooded sweatshirt. She zipped up the sweatshirt over a pink tank top and wove her auburn hair into a loose braid. Then she applied a dab of sheer gloss to her lips and bounded down the stairs. I'll be home by 10. I'm going to go to the diner, she called to her mom, who was looking for something in the freezer. Okay, Mary, we'll see you later, Mrs. White answered. Josh was waiting in the parking lot of Rose's Diner. He was leaning up against the side of his Porsche, under the gray, dark sky and the thunder, but rainless, looking heartbreakingly handsome as usual. Mary shivered as she stepped out of her car and wished she'd worn something a little warmer. Where is everyone? She asked, not seeing any of her friends in the parking lot. Josh smiled. Don't I even get a hello? Mary leaned against his car next to him. Hello, she said. I hope it don't rain. Josh wiped his hand across the glossy paint on his car, as if he were polishing it. They're coming, he said. I think Shannon and Kimmy went to pick up Tanya and her friend. Just then, Shannon pulled up in her car. They were all laughing and carrying on inside. Shannon rolled down her window. So what are we going to do? She asked. Josh whispered. I've got some brewskis in the trunk. Mary recognized Tanya's date, Rob Wheeler, scrunched in the back seat. He was a good-looking guy with dark hair and unusually long legs. Mary guessed that was why he was the school's star basketball player. Shannon cackled. Josh has got brewskis. They all laughed. Mary suggested, why don't we go to your boat? Great idea, Kimmy agreed. I could go for a little late-night cruise. Josh sighed. No can do. My sister's there with her boyfriend. Mary was getting really cold. Josh must have picked up on it, because he suddenly wrapped his arms around her. Let's go check out the mall. Mary's parents are the builders, Josh said. What do you say, Mary? He asked. I don't know, Mary protested. There's really nothing to do there. I mean, it won't be open until Thanksgiving. Exactly, Josh said. No one will be there until Thanksgiving either. It's the perfect place to, kick back. You mean go inside? Mary asked. Tanya poked her head out the back window. What are you afraid of? Your mommy might find out? She challenged. Everyone was staring at Mary, waiting for her to say okay. She didn't want to look like a wimp, and she guessed they couldn't really do any harm. She admitted, Well, I do know this back way to get inside. I don't think they've set up the alarm system yet. Shannon hooted. Cool, let's go! It was too late to back out now, Mary thought. She instantly regretted her decision. Why are you being so irresponsible, she thought. Before she knew it, Mary was leading the caravan to the mall. It was pitch black outside except for a few street lights that shone across the empty, massive parking lot, and the streaks of lightning that lit the sky every now and then. Mary pulled her car around the back of one of the department stores and stood by the chain-link fence. The temporary security booth was dark and empty. Josh lugged the six-pack of beer out of his trunk. Mary tried to remember how to get in. Her parents had showed her the back way just a few weeks ago. I'm sorry, but this is creepy, Kimmy said, slamming the passenger door of Shannon's BMW. It's like something out of a horror movie. She lowered her voice and croaked. The mall with no shoppers. Shannon shook at the fence. Let us in, she said, laughing. Shh, Mary hissed. I think there's a security guard around here somewhere. She peered around the dark parking lot. Let's just leave, you guys. I just don't remember how to get inside. Rob Wheeler stretched his slender arms between two fences and effortlessly freed the latch. The gate cracked open. Party time, he said, casually stepping inside. They all slid in after him. Mary knew she wasn't going to be able to relax here. She'd have to spend her time keeping an eye on her wild friends. She slipped through the fence and chased behind the others, trying to keep them quiet. "Over here, you guys," she whispered. Mary stood before a black box on the wall and struggled to remember the lock combination. Carefully, she punched in the entry code. A series of beeps went off, and then a click. She pulled open the heavy metal delivery door. Her heart was pounding, and she froze for a moment, silently praying that a blaring alarm wouldn't sound. All was quiet, and she decided that if they did get caught, she could say that she was just looking for her parents or something. After all, they were here late almost every night. Mary ushered her friends through the doors of the cavernous receiving dock for the mall's main department store. Mary motioned for everyone to be quiet as she led the giggling group to the dimly lit store. Cardboard boxes lined the empty walls, and disassembled shelves and counters waiting to be put up created the dangerous walking zone. Tanya stopped to peek inside a sealed carton. Mary looked back and hissed, "Don't touch anything! Come on!" Tanya gave the box a shove and glared back angrily. "Don't be so serious, Mary. I was just curious." Josh cracked open a beer and whispered, "Yeah? Well, curiosity killed the cat. Didn't your mother teach you that?" Tanya narrowed her eyes and smirked at Josh, then purred, "Meow." She grabbed Rob by the hand. "Aren't you going to share, Josh?" she asked, pointing at his beer. Josh snapped the beers out of the plastic binder ring and passed them around. Mary stopped and looked up at the steel security gate that stood between the department store and the rest of the mall. Shannon peered out into the huge corridor and whistled. "Whoa, check it out! There's a giant oak tree in the middle of the mall." Mary smiled, feeling a sense of pride in her parents' work. "That's going to be the play area for the kids. That tree is like a miniature version of the one in the Mall of America, and it has 3 levels. She pointed up at the glass dome above the giant tree. "And you can see the sky through there." Kimmy peered through the steel bars to take a look. "Wow, can we go check it out?" "I don't know," Mary said nervously. "I don't think we should go out there. There might be a guard buzzing around." "Oh, come on, Mary. We haven't seen anyone at all, and you know it," Kimmy said. With a mischievous grin on her face, she pushed the rolling gate open a few inches. "It's not even locked, girlfriend," she whined. Shannon took a gulp of her beer and slid the gate open a little further. "You're right, Kimmy. It's not locked." She looked at Mary as if asking her permission to go through. Mary rolled her eyes. "Like, okay, but don't touch anything," she warned. The teenagers slid through the gate and took off running toward the monstrous treehouse. Mary threw her hands up in the air. Were they totally insane, she wondered? "And be careful," Mary whispered sharply. "There's—" Kimmy suddenly tripped over a beam on the floor. She shrieked as her beer flew out of her hand, and she landed hard on her ass. Mary finished her sentence mumbling to herself. "There's stuff on the floor." Then she chased after Kimmy and helped her up. Tanya was laughing hysterically. "Good thing you've got a little padding down there." Kimmy glared at Tanya as she pulled her sweater over her hips. "Thanks a lot," she said. "Come on, guys," Mary said, pulling her by the hand. The dark shape moved silently past the fancy sports cars in the parking lot, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning. He'd watched the giggling teenagers enter the mall, watched them sneak through the gates. They were inside now, and he was going to trap them there. He swiftly traced their steps and vanished into the blackness of the huge structure. Shannon was the first to enter the child-sized doorway that was carved through the massive trunk of the tree. The other kids followed behind her and up the winding staircase to the upper levels of the giant treehouse. A small lookout platform nestled amongst the fiberglass branches allowed a bird's-eye view of the entire mall below. They settled on the floor, panting heavily from the 3-flight climb. Mary peered out over the rail and motioned for everyone to be quiet, to make sure that no one, particularly a security guard, was aware of their presence. She saw no one and sat down to relax for a few moments. Kimmy looked around. "Wow, it is so pretty up here. I can't wait till this mall opens." Mary smiled. "Like, yeah, This place is going to be totally cool. We're actually going to have some real stores around here. The shopping in this town is mega lame. You can say that again, Shannon agreed. I have to drive nearly 40 miles to buy my clothes. Mary hugged her knees, enjoying sitting so close to Josh. She looked at her friends through the dim light and smiled. After all was said and done, she really was glad that her family had moved to Haddonfield. Hey, where's Tanya and Rob? She asked, not seeing them within view. Josh whispered. They took off a few minutes ago. They probably want a little privacy, if you know what I mean. Mary knew what he meant, all right, but didn't like the idea of her friends straying off by themselves on this little late-night tour. Tanya, Rob, she called. No one answered. Forget about them, Kimmy said. I'm sure they'll be back in about 15 minutes. Shannon giggled at Kimmy's snide insult. Yeah, really? 15 minutes? Josh mocked. Is that all you girls ever get? A deep red blush flushed Kimmy's face. Shut up, Josh! Mary felt uneasy. She didn't trust Tanya and was afraid she'd try to steal something. Tanya giggled as Rob led her back through the security gates of the department store. I don't think we should fool around in here, she whispered a little uneasily. Rob squeezed her hand tightly and felt a tingle through his hormone-ravaged body. Trust me, he said breathlessly. Tanya finished her beer and threw the can, which clanked across the cement floor. Rob retraced their steps to the delivery room and pushed open a heavy door. No one will find us in here, he said. Tanya's hair stood on end as her eyes adjusted to the darkness. Hundreds of naked mannequins stared at them with glassy, cold eyes. This is too weird. I feel like they're watching us, she said. Let's go back and find the others, she suggested. Rob pulled her close with his strong arms and planted a spine-tingling kiss on her lips. Tanya felt weak and dizzy. She closed her eyes and pretended that it was Josh who was holding her tightly and kissing her, giving her the male attention she so desperately craved. Okay, she said. She kissed him back and allowed Rob to press his body tightly against hers. He groaned with pleasure as she ran her fingers through his hair. Rob ripped off his letterman's jacket and dropped it on the floor. Tanya let him slide his hand under her black cashmere sweater as he kissed her neck. Then she suddenly opened her eyes and wondered if she was making a mistake. Will going all the way with Rob really cause Josh to be jealous? She wondered. Had Josh even noticed when we left a few minutes ago? A dark shape suddenly and unmistakably moved among the mannequins in the back of the room. Tanya felt a spike of fear travel down her spine as she pushed Rob's face away and whispered, Let's go. There's someone in here. Rob lazily glanced over his shoulder and kissed her again. Just relax, baby. There's no one here but you and me. Tanya struggled out of his grasp. I really saw something, she pleaded. It was right over... Tanya shrieked and Rob jumped back as a pile of naked wooden bodies suddenly tumbled on top of her. Tanya's heart thudded with terror as the sound of her screaming filled the air. Her body numb with fright, she scrambled to dig her way out of the pile of arms, legs, and heads. A pair of wooden fingers were gnarled around a lock of her curly blonde hair. Help me! She screamed. Rob stumbled up from the floor and glanced into the darkness. Was someone else in the room with them? No, he decided. They must have brushed against the pile and knocked the bodies over. He laughed at the ridiculous scene and imagined himself boasting to his buddies about this one over lunch tomorrow. Tanya was still screaming like a lunatic, so he began pushing the mannequins aside. It was so hard to see anything in the dark. He grabbed Tanya's hand and had started to pull her out when his legs were suddenly knocked out from beneath him. What the fuck? He shouted as he tumbled to the ground, smacking his skull against the concrete floor. Rob was shaking his head and trying to push himself up from the floor when he saw it. He tried to scream, but no sound came out of his dry throat. This can't be real. A hulking figure emerged through the rows of mannequins. The gleam of the razor-sharp butcher knife clutched in his hand promised death as he stepped closer and closer. Just as Tanya freed her hair from the grasp of the cold mannequin hand, She looked up and screamed as the blade of the knife plunged into Rob's chest, crunching through his ribs and tearing apart his lungs. Rob reached out a desperate hand. With savage swiftness, the dark shape grabbed his arm, twisting it savagely out of its socket, with a flesh-ripping pop. "Oh no! God, no! Please let this be some kind of a sick joke!" She opened her eyes and uttered a silent gasp of terror as she saw the horrifying, dying body of her date that lay crumpled at her feet. "This is real! This is really happening!" Rob's guttural scream stopped, and his mouth hung open, like that of a dead fish. Bright red blood gushed from his mouth and nose. The face of the murderer was hidden in the shadows. He stepped forward, raising the bloodied knife. Using all of her strength, Tanya winced and kicked the pile of bodies towards the attacker, which only made him stagger slightly. The figure recoiled and lunged at her with the knife. Tanya's last desperate scream was cut short when the blade rammed into her throat, as the shadowed figure savagely ripped the knife out again. She put her hands over the gaping wound and felt the warm, sticky liquid pulsing out of her body. She tried to scream again, but could only manage a bubbling gurgle. Tanya sank to her knees and looked into the cold, dead eyes of her murderer, whose scar-puckered face was hidden behind a hideous white mask. She knew who had done this, but would not live to tell about it. Her heavy eyelids closed, and everything faded to white. Mary was rolling on the floor of the platform laughing as Josh sang an out-of-key version of 99 Bottles of Beer on the Wall. Josh sang out, 70 bottles of beer. "Shut up, you're driving me crazy," Mary howled, grabbing her aching sides. Josh finally stopped singing and put his arm around her. "You win. What would you like to hear next? Feelings?" Shannon laughed and said, "Speaking of feelings, it's been 20 minutes since our buddies left. 20 minutes. Maybe I should find myself a basketball player." "Maybe you should find yourself a cold shower," Kimmy joked. Mary stood up to stretch her legs and looked down at the ground level of the mall. At the very least, it was so totally rude of them to, just take off like that. Where would they have gone? Who knows? They could be anywhere. This is a big place, Josh responded, unconcerned. Squelch! A loud squelching noise rang out. "What was that?" Mary whispered, the loud sound making her body jerk. "It came from up there," Kimmy said, pointing upward. She was staring at the sky dome. Suddenly, something swift and dark flashed outside, across the top of the glass dome. The teenagers squealed. "Oh my God!" Mary yelled. Let's get out of here! It must be security!" "Or the SWAT team," Shannon choked out. Mary, Josh, Kimmy, and Shannon scrambled down the staircase inside the tree trunk, ran across the mall toward the department store. Fear pulsed through Mary's body as she ran behind her friends. What if we get caught? My parents will never trust me again. Shannon slammed into the security gate. "Someone locked it!" she screamed. Josh grabbed the steel bars and tugged as hard as he could. The gate slid open. "It's not locked," he said, huffing. "Just closed." "Who cares?" Kimmy whimpered, looking back at the sky dome. "Let's just get out of here, okay?" What about Tanya and Rob, guys?" Mary protested. "We can't just leave them in there." Josh pulled Mary by the hands. "They'll be okay," he declared. "We don't all need to get in trouble, do we?" "I guess not." Mary gulped as her eyes searched the dark expanse of the mall one last time. "Come on!" Josh shouted, dragging her toward the loading dock. Mary allowed herself to be guided through the maze of boxes and shelving on the floor, worried about Tanya and Rob and angry at them at the same time. Those stupid jerks. They deserve whatever they get, she thought. Once outside, Mary breathed in the cold night air. She hesitated, looking at the security lock. "I'm going to leave it open for them," she said. "Whatever," Shannon panted. "See you guys later," she called as she and Kimmy disappeared through the chain-link fence and jumped into her car. Josh's body was pumping with adrenaline. The whole thing had been such a rush. He stopped Mary and pushed her shoulders back against the fence. Bewilderment and surprise filled her widened eyes. What are you doing? We've got to get out of here, she stammered. Josh pressed his lips against hers. You really turned me on, Mary. That was a radical experience, he whispered breathlessly. Mary got lost in his kiss for a moment and nearly forgot that someone had been watching them. But she opened her eyes and jumped when she heard the noise above them. Cluck! The noise had come from somewhere on the roof. Mary uttered a gasp of panic. Let's go, she pleaded, her heart racing as quickly as Josh's, but for entirely different reasons. Josh gave Mary another kiss as she grabbed his hand. Hurry up, she hissed. Josh hopped in his car and started the engine. Mary jumped in her car and the two teens sped away from the mall. Mary tossed her hair back and sank into the driver's seat, feeling relieved. But she also felt wild and crazy, just like she used to. She was lightheaded from all the excitement. And Josh, wow, he was something else. She watched the taillights of his Porsche disappear down the road as he sped away in his pumped-up sports car. What a night, she exclaimed. Okay, this has been Chapter 7, 8, and 9 of Halloween, the Old Myers Place. I'm sorry that it's been like a week since you guys have heard from me. We had some bad storms last week, and I have been living without power for almost an entire week. No electricity. Having to charge my phone up in my car, borrowed a generator for a couple days. It's been nuts. Anyways, guys, what did you think of tonight's upload? We got our first kill, and I think those 2 kills were pretty intense. So, I think if they had seen Scream, they would have known the rule. You screw, you die. Bye, Tanya and Rob. But thank you for being our first victims in Halloween, the Old Myers Place. Alright, guys, I'll see you soon with more of this great book. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Alright, guys, be sure to check out these 2 awesome audiobooks up above. The links will be on the right and the left, and in the middle is Michael's sexy face. Click that to subscribe today. Be sure to click that notification bell, and I will see you next time.